Alright class, so as requested I am going to make a video series on how to rig the head. Now this is somewhat based on some tutorials that I found online. I did very much like their method, so I'm going to base it kind of off that, but I've changed up some stuff to not only simplify it, I just found it's not really simplifying. You're going to get very, very similar results actually, but with the same result on a simpler method, where's the problem in that? That's my thinking, at least. So here is good old Rudy provided to us by Professor Alex Duque. I've made some slight tweaks to it on the model. Just there were some little hanging edges and stuff like that. Minor things, really. But just things that, if I continued with these videos, you would notice very, very easily. So we're going to go with this. There's already a little bit of organization that's been done. That I went ahead and did early. I made a mesh group, which we're going to end up with, if you recall from the first part of this class, when we did the body, I do organize at the very last minute. It doesn't need to be done at the end. I can do it throughout, which I tend to do, due to a little bit of obsessive compulsive disorder. But, so you'll see I've got a Rudy mesh group already. Here's the head. Now, generally speaking, I would have the whole body. But seeing as we're concentrating on the head in this case, I'm going to stick to that, and you'll notice his head is actually in the positioning where it would be. Rudy's a little over 6 feet tall, if I recall, and I am set to feet in my settings, so he's already set. Now, I'm just going to pretend that the body's there, really, because this method can just literally be adopted to the methods that we've used in body rigging. So basically, if you pretend there's a body here, from the neck joints on, this can be used with the other rig that we've done. So I've got the head, I've got his teeth that are inside. We're probably going to be hiding that for the most part, or putting it on a layer. I'll probably put it on a layer actually with and set the mode to template so that it's just kind of, light gray wireframe the entire time. And I've got his eyes as well grouped together. So that's going to be pretty important for probably the second or third video. I haven't really defined how I'm going to organize everything. We're probably going to go a little back and forth here and there, work on this area, maybe finish it up and work on another area, and then maybe go back to some other areas, just because it tends to work very well with the workflow. But a lot of these steps can be done in a different order completely. So first things first, though, we need to set up a joint structure. Now, one thing I do want you to realize, we are right on the YZ axis, as we should be. That's very important. Obviously, you always want your character to face, or your model in general, to face positive Z. And the reason why is, well, when I go into my front view, I see the front. When I go into my side view, I see the side. He's a little bit behind that line, but I don't see a huge issue in this. Generally, I like my characters to be right centered on, the 0, 0, 0 point, but this will work just as well. So, without further ado, actually I'm going to start in my side view, and I'm going to bring up my wireframe on shaded, because I do need to see his wireframe. And my goal here is really just to set the initial series of joints. And what I'm looking for right now is just to do some neck joints, which will start with the base of the neck. We're going to have another one that goes about right here, I think, and then one that goes behind the ear, because when you're thinking about your spine, your spine meets up at the base of your skull, and you're going to have mainly 2 pivots. Granted, you have a lot more vertebra in your neck than just 2, but if we get very specific, that creates a lot of controls, and the animator is just going to scream if they have too much to work with. So we're going to simplify it. We're just going to have basically 2 controls. We're also going to be mimicking something that kind of happens in nature, and I've already brought up the video here on YouTube, and this is something that I found a while ago. Looking up chicken head IK tends to find it, but this guy, let me mute it so that you don't have to hear it. I'll just kind of talk over him and find the specific spot. But what he's found is that a chicken can basically self-regulate and almost immediately where their head stays in space, and he should be moving it. Here we go. I think it's right about here. You can see that as he's moving the chicken's body, the head stays still. And when you have a lot of controls, you have something called counter keying, where let's say you want to move the base of your neck down but keep the head looking forward. You would have to counter key the upper neck to keep that. So what we're going to do is try and mimic this exact same motion. And I'm going to try and blur out all of this stuff if I can, so you don't have to see the any of these advertisements and stuff. So hopefully you're not seeing any of that right now. But you can see that this is really actually pretty cool. It will allow your animator to save a lot of time. So, having said that, I'll go ahead and go back into Maya here. And what we're going to do is go ahead and create the initial joints. So, just going to grab my joint tool. If you want, you can reset the tool settings just in case you've changed anything. Not a huge deal. But I'm going to start by creating his base neck joint. Now, I've added a bit of extra mesh here. I might even go a little higher sometimes, but I've left a little bit in there just for the sake of having it. But what I'm going to do is start by creating the initial joint, which it's not letting me drag it around. Let me see. Alright, looks like it's not going to actively let me drag it around. You're not going to see it at least, but it shouldn't be a big deal. So, I'm going to create that. That's my initial joint, so that's kind of the lower neck. And I'm going to go up to, trying to think of what's going to get me a good angle, because I know where I'm going to end here. So I'm trying to think, I want this nice, he's got this, diagonal line here that could represent the angle at which I want the next joint to be oriented. So I might make the next one right about here. And I notice that my X-ray joints is not working, so let me toggle that real quick. Perfect. So that'll be the second joint. Notice the orientation is going straight up at the moment. We're going to fix that in a second by creating the last joint that I want, which is going to go right behind his ear. I could do it here or here. I think I'm going to use this one right about here. Okay, and you can see that that previous joint goes ahead and aligns itself to it, which is great. So I'll go ahead and hit enter. I'll name these all in just a minute. I do need a couple of other joints, and I'm just trying to think of the positioning for everything. I think I'll be okay for that. Just thinking in my head. Pardon me. Alright, so I'm going to create 2 more joint chains really quick. These are going to be for the jaw. We're actually going to have a counter jaw, which I just tend to call the upper jaw, which technically speaking, you don't have an upper jaw. You have an upper palate, which connects to your cranium. But we're going to make it so that you can not only rotate the jaw from its natural pivot right about here. I'll be talking more about that in a minute. But you'll also be able to rotate the upper part of the head, which if you hold your jaw with your hand and try and rotate your own head, you can do it. It's just not very natural. Technically, the main moving part of your skull is your jaw, otherwise known as the mandible. So we're just going to allow for some extra movement. It's kind of for extremes, really, but it does really give you some good movement. So I'll create those joints. Now, what I'm going to do first is create his lower jaw. And if you think about your jaw, the jaw actually starts up by your ear, right in front of an area called the tragus. It's that little hard piece of cartilage right at the front of your ear. And he doesn't have a very pronounced one. It's kind of about here, really, on your ear. His just isn't very pronounced at the moment. So I'm going to go right in front of that to about right here. And that's going to be the start of where his jaw is, because if you think about the jaw, it kind of goes in this area right here. Not quite a 90-degree angle, a little bit more. So I'm going to go from there straight to his lower lip. Now you'll notice the scales of the joints kind of get skewed a little bit. I'm going to be adjusting the radii of all the joints here and there if need be. You may see in another video the radius just changes, but it's not a big deal. It's just for viewability for your sake. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and again this is just going to basically be the axis for the lower jaw, and I'll be painting weights for this just so that everything works nice and neat. And I'm going to block it in, and I might do some active painting on it in the videos. You might just find that in the next video it works a little bit better, because I think if you have to sit here and watch me paint weights, it's kind of like watching paint dry. So I'm going to keep you guys as entertained as possible. So there's his lower jaw. Now for the upper jaw, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm not just going to draw it in space. What I want to do is I'm going to actually start it at the same point as this joint right here. So what I'm going to do, I don't want to click on that joint with the joint tool active, because it's going to make me start from that joint. I want to create a brand new one. So I'm going to have what I call a joint on joint situation. There's just one joint on top of another. So what I'm going to do is hold down V, as in Victor, on my keyboard, and I'm going to click out in space here and just kind of drag over until I'm right on top of that joint. Now, for whatever reason right now I'm noticing it's not actively showing it. So once I let go of my mouse, it's working. I can't explain that. This is a first that I've ever seen that happen on my computer. So I apologize, but when you do it, you should see the joint kind of popping all over the place. And I'll double check and make sure that it's snapped right on top of that joint, because obviously I can snap to verts too, and I don't want that. But this is going to be for the upper jaw. So I'm going to go from there pretty much straight across to his upper lip, right about there. And there we go. Now, in case you're wondering why the joints aren't moving, like I said, I don't know. I mean, I'm holding my mouse and dragging right now. That joint should be following it, but once I let go, it does it. So same thing here, moving my mouse around, and then it pops. Not sure what's going on. I'll look into it later. Could be because I'm recording. I have no clue. These joints are pretty large. I'm going to go ahead and shrink them. Let's try that works. I generally make these end ones very small, just so you guys can see them a little bit better. Okay, that should be pretty good. Hopefully you guys can see it rather well on your screens. In case you can't, there it is. What I got to do first, though, is I'll name them in a second, but I need to reorient some of these things because right now they're end joints do not have similar orientations. You can see the Z is pointing straight out. And I'd like it to follow the parent joint. And while these joints are not going to, those end joints are not really going to be moved, I would like them to at least match. It's just a preference. So what I'll do is just use the Orient Joint tool, which is under your animation set, and you'll find it under Skeleton Orient Joint. And what I'll do, and in 2012 it's a little bit different, so hopefully I can get this to work on the first try. I'm going to try this one first because that one's going to be a lot more obvious. What I'm going to do is set it so that the secondary axis is set to none, which basically this will tell it to orient based on the parent. So if I hit apply, and it didn't work that time, let's see, try that. Primary axis. Give me 1 sec, I'm going to pause this real quick. Alright, so I'm noticing that the Orient Joint tool is just not working exactly the same as it used to, so I'm going to show you how to do it manually. It's really not important for some of these joints to actually do this. Like I said, it's just mostly just to satisfy my obsessive-compulsive disorder. But if you want to adjust them so that their orientations match the parent joint, you can do it manually by using your attribute editor. So I'll go ahead and go into my attribute editor, and if we look down at the joint orient right here, we can go ahead and adjust this. Basically what I'm looking for here is, again, where X is pointing forward, and in this case Y will be up. So I'm noticing that I do need to rotate this along Y, and you'll see that as I rotate or adjust that, it is going to rotate. However, it looks like it's going in a very strange direction. So I'm not seeing this as working exactly how I'm hoping. But what I can do is adjust the X first, so I can go to my side view and kind of match that as best as possible. So I'm just holding down Control and clicking in the box, and what I'll do is just do it by hand. If you recall, in 2011, you could literally just use the Orient Joint tool, set to none, and it would just match the parent, which was fantastic. And in 2012, it's just not the same. Alright, I think I got it that time. There we go. Okay, so what I did was I just, looks like if I just adjust the x-axis one to 0, and in this case it just happened to be y to 0 as well, it rotated, and you can see if I do this, it will adjust. So again, I'm just trying to match the parent, and in this case if I bring up my move tool, you can see X is aiming forward and Z pointing at the right side, so now I have the exact same thing right there. So I can do this to all those end joints that I need to do it on, and in this case it looks like I don't have to do a whole lot. Maybe just adjust the Y-axis on that one, and that got it. And if you'll see in this view, if I can just get my mouse to zoom in properly, it is matching the axis. And like I said, you can do this by hand. I prefer to be a bit more specific on them, but this will work just fine. Okay, so I apologize for that confusion, but hopefully everything else will run smoothly. I normally prefer to work in 2011, but I'm trying to move up in the versions just to get it a little bit more fresh in the videos, because right now we're up to 2013 at the time of this recording, so I'd like it to be as close as possible. I have 2011 and 2012, so in this case, we're good to go. So now I'll go ahead and name these real quick, and then I'll do some parenting. I don't want this video to be horribly long, so I'd like to move on. So let's start by naming these. I'm going to start with the neck ones. This will be BNJNT, and if you recall, BNJNT stands for bind joint. These are actually going to be bound to the surface. I'm going to use a different method for skinning this time that will not just use every joint. It will use very specific ones. So BNJNT neck A01. And I'm going to copy that because I know I'm going to use it multiple times. Okay. Then I'll have, this is going to get renamed in a little bit anyway, but neck B, and I can have neck C. Alright. Oops. I want capital C. Alright. Next up, this is my lower jaw, sorry. So I'll name this BNJNT lower jaw 01. Copy that. You'll notice I'm not using the ABC on this because the other one is a BE joint, otherwise known as bone end, meaning this one's not actually going to be skinned. It's there so that we can get a proper axis on that original joint, but also as just kind of a visual reference as to where the jaw is. Okay, so that's a BE joint. The last one is going to be the BNJNT upper jaw. And copy that. And the bottom one will be a BE joint, just like the other one. Okay, so now I'm just going to do some simple parenting here. And what I want is to take both the lower jaw root and the upper jaw root, and I'm going to parent both of those to neck C. Okay, so if you're following along, you can do this in the outliner if you'd like, where I just take those the roots of the jaws and parent them under neck C in the outliner by middle click dragging, and there you go, you can see it connects it. Or if you want to do it the other way, you select the roots of both jaws, select that neck C joint, and hit P for parent. And now you'll see that when I rotate this later on, both the jaws will move with it and everything will be perfect. So one more step that I got to do real quick is I want to mimic that chicken head thing. So if you'll notice, when I rotate the root joint that we have here, neck A, you see that everything just will aim downward. Not necessarily something that we want. We'd like to make it easier on the animator, so we're going to prevent the need for counter keying by doing one quick step here. What I'm going to do is select the neck B joint. That's that one in the middle of this mess. We're going to have a lot of joints right here, but for the most part, it should be very easy to find everything. Okay, so I'm just going to select neck B. I will go to skeleton and disconnect joint. What this is going to do is it's not just going to disconnect things. It's actually going to make a copy of this exact same joint right in the same spot. So if I hit that, boom. We now have two segments here. We have one right here, starts with neck A, sorry, and that will be our root with a bone end joint. And then we have everything else, exactly how it was before. So what I want to do is, I'm just going to name this real quick. I'm going to call this BEJNT. I'll call this also neck A01. So it's kind of the end joint to neck A. Now you might find in class I'll name this a root, just so it's a bit more understandable. Or it's not technically a cog, which we've dealt with in the first part of the class, which was the center of gravity. This is kind of a root joint for the head, which we know as neck A or lower neck, whatever you want to call it. So this is a BE joint. This will not actually be skinned, but it's going to be used for a very important reason. Okay. So what I do with this now is I'm going to take that bone end joint, and then I'm also going to select the neck B01. So hold down Control and click in the outliner because they're right on top of each other. It's very hard to select them in the in the viewport. And I'm going to do a point constraint between the two of them. I want maintain offset on just to be on the safe side in this case, and I'll add it. And now, when I rotate that root joint, you'll see that the neck stays stationary, mimicking what happens on the chicken's head. So we'll be able to rotate the lower neck and that head will stay perfectly still, eliminating a lot of counter keying on the animator side. And I'm sure they'll thank you for that. So, having done that, we have a majority of the basics of the head. I'm going to add one more set real quick, and I know I'm going to need to go into a wireframe view for this because I'm going to create some joints for the eyes. 3 sets per eye. One's for the eye itself, one's for the upper lid, and one will be for the lower lid. Alright, so I'm going to make the eye joints here. Alright, I think this should be pretty easy to do. I'm just going to create the left eye first, but like I said, there's going to be 3 chains. There's going to be one for the eyeball itself, then one for the upper lid, and one for the lower lid. So I'm just going to get in close here. I'm actually going to try this if I can get it. I'm going to hold down V and just move around so I can snap to the center of the eye if I can. And I'll adjust this later before I attach anything. But so essentially I have it in the center of the eye by snapping, and then I'll hold down Shift. And I had some issues with this recently. I don't know why, but I'm going to hold down Shift and just create one for the front of the eye, and it looks like it worked. But I'm going to check this in my viewport, and I'm a little bit off from the center of the eye. So now that I've completed the chain by hitting Enter, I'm just going to go ahead and hold down V and just snap it so that it is in the center, and you can double check that. I am going to shrink the radius of these as well to something much smaller and manageable. So there it is. Now you can see it's pretty much right at the center. Granted, the eye has 2 parts. There's the eyeball. Oh, I'm getting both of the... apparently the left and right eye are slightly different. Not a big deal. I can fix that later. But either way, we're centered enough where this should work just fine. I'm going to adjust the orientation on this joint real quick. I understand that it is a little bit hard to see everything with a wireframe here, but hopefully you get what I'm doing. But you can see that X is pointing out the left and Z is aiming. It's going off of the world space coordinates, so I'm just going to go in here, and I know that I would rotate this along Y. So in the attributor, you'll notice it's already rotated 90 degrees in Y, so set that to 0, and there you go. This joint chain is perfectly straight in terms of the XYZ axis. If I go to my side view, I can show that to you again, just because I hit Shift. So that's good to go now. I need to create 2 more joint chains, though, and this one's going to be a little interesting considering that weird thing that's happening with creating the joints, but I'll give it a shot. What I'm looking for now is I can see that right here is my eyelid, and I'm going to try and aim it off of that. In fact, first thing, I'm going to make this joint a little bit smaller in terms of the radius, just so I can see everything a little better later. But now I got my joint tool. I'm going to hold down V and try and snap to that same starting point right there, which it looks like it did it. It's matched up with that other joint. And I'm going to click at the edge of his upper eyelid, which is right about here. Okay, there we go. Hit Enter, and definitely make these a lot smaller because they are ridiculously huge. Okay, and I'll get my joint tool up again and do the exact same thing. I'm going to try and snap it onto there, which it looks like it did. Perfect. And then go and make one for the lower lid, which looks like it's about right here. So I'll go right there. Hit Enter and change their radii as well. And I'll check it out and see what I've come up with. It looks like I'm just a little off. Looks like they went closer to the center, but that's fine. I can do the exact same thing where I'll just go to my front view and snap them over. Now if you want to check, looks like I did decent enough in terms of their positioning. I'm not terribly fond of where that lower one is. I think I was off just a bit. Let me move that down and try the... oh, it automatically reoriented it. Well, that's something new that I haven't seen yet. Okay, so I can adjust the child joint, and it reorients the parent joint. News to me. 2012 has some good stuff after all. Alright, so that's a little bit better. And like I said, I moved it and it reoriented the parent joint, which was fantastic. Now I need to just go ahead and reorient the child joints so that they match. So I'll get in close here, and hopefully we'll be able to see this. I'll go into my attribute editor. I know first I'm going to change the Y back to 0, but it looks like that's a little off. I'm going to change them both, the X and the Y to 0, and there you go. It matches perfectly. Awesome. Same thing here. 0 and 0. Looks like what it's doing in this case, which is a little different than what I've seen in the past, is it's basically trying to make the end joint match the world space. So these offsets that it's putting in here are what's making it match the world space. So if we just set them to 0, it matches the parent joint, which is just as easy as using the 2011 and prior style of orient joint under the skeleton menu. So this is just as easy, thankfully. So there we go. There's our eye joints. I'll name these really quick. This will be the upper lid. So BNJNT upper. Oh, I need L in there. L upper lid, because we're going to mirror these over. 01. Copy that. And the second one will be a BE joint. Okay. Now I'm on the I joint itself. Oh, wait, did I name them wrong? I did. I was looking at wrong. So this is just the eyeball joint. Not the upper lid. This is the left eye. And this will also be the eye. And this will be a BE joint. Sorry about that. Just make sure you look before you leave, right? So there we go. This now is the upper lid. BE, and then the last one is the lower lid. And this will be the BE joint. Okay, so now I have all those joints. What I'm going to do is take the root of each three of them, the parent joint in this case, and parent all of those to the upper jaw joint, which obviously it's a little harder to see over here, but what I'm going to do is just select the bone that connects the upper jaw main joint to its end joint, and that's this one right here. Okay, so there's the upper jaw joint, you can see it, and I'll just hit P for parent, and there is my left eye's joint system. And that, the upper lid looks fine. Looks a little strange in this angle, but that should work just fine. So what I can do now is looks like I have the roots of all three of those selected. Yep, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to go to skeleton. Sorry, that's skin. I need skeleton, mirror joint, and I want to mirror across YZ. Search for _L_, replace with R. Oh, you can only do one at a time. I always make that mistake. So one at a time. There's one of them. However, the orientations are off, meaning I need to change it to orientation. There we go. So it's matching the exact same orientation, X pointing forward, Z pointing out the right. I'll do the lids, and there we go. So we have our eye joints set up, which means we are essentially just about done. But what we need to do now is actually block in the weights for this. So here's the cool thing that we're going to do that's a little bit different than what we've done before. Last time when we skinned it, we just used every joint, but not every joint actually has influence. So what I'm going to do is select all the BN joints. Now this could take a while if you have a lot more joints. So what we can do, I can use this up here. I can click on this little box. You may have it already visible, but I'm going to use select by name. This thing is awesome for this. So what I'll type in is BNJNT star, and what that does will select anything that starts with BNJNT. There they are. Perfect. So with those selected, I'm now going to select the mesh for the head as well. I'll go to Skin, Bind Skin, Smooth Bind, and I'll just set up my options real quick. We're going to have selected joints. It's already selected in my case. I want closest in hierarchy, classic linear, and interactive. This will be just fine. I do not want post. For those of you that like to make a joke in my class about using post, we're using interactive. So I'll go ahead and hit bind skin. You'll notice that the color skeleton won't work as well, but it's fine. And now you'll see that as I rotate, I have weights, but they are awful because Maya went ahead and tried to assume what we wanted. So here's where we actually have to block in weights